I didn't really plan on originally doing a live, but why not? Why not? I was going to wait for my last one to get a little more views because that was a really good live, and I figured if I made one too soon, then it would cut back on people watching the last few. Really, well, the last several were really good, but I figured I would come on here to mention some specific things that were on my mind, namely the timeline as it pertains to the future and how it relates to the subject matter that I often cover on this channel, insofar as the collapse and the wars and how to navigate and survive them. This is really important because I'm going to tie in with the biblical aspects of it, because of course I read my Bible and I understand my Bible, and my entire goal on this channel is not only to help people navigate and survive the collapse and war situations, but it's also to show people the different dynamics at work behind the scenes, such as the power struggles and power dynamics between both sets of elites, and how that relates and shapes what's coming in the future. And also tying it in with the Bible, because my objective here is to not only help people navigate these things, but also to show that the prophecies of the Bible are indeed very real. And, there's a lot of people that deny them, but the reality is aligning exactly with what the Word says, especially when you look at Jeremiah. Now, I've read Jeremiah 50 and 51 in several videos that I've made in the past. They're way back there if you'd like to watch them. But in Jeremiah, it specifically mentions an order of events as it relates to Mystery Babylon, also known as USA. So here's what's going to happen, folks. There's going to be a collapse for sure, because famine and all the different hardships are mentioned specifically in Jeremiah. Now, multiple times in 50 and 51 of Jeremiah is mentioned the foreign invasion and who it'll come from. It'll come from the nations to the north, which is Eurasia, the Eurasian bloc, king of the north, king of the east, and all their little allies. They're going to come from across the north, meaning across the poles. They're going to attack in all directions, not in any one specific direction. When it says the nations to the north, it's talking about the nations across the North Pole, but they're going to attack us in all directions, from inside and from without. And I've shown you all how that works with physical, real doctrines of our enemies called hybrid warfare, in the truest sense of the word of hybrid warfare. Also, fourth generation warfare, which was crafted by the Chinese and Russians in tandem, because that's a doctrine of their own making. For both of them have contributed to that doctrine. They're the closest of allies, and they've been allies for quite some time. It's nothing new, unlike how most people try to make it out like it's a new development when it's really not, because if you look at the history of Sino-Russian and also Sino-Soviet relations, they had very strong relations in the 50s before they had a series of policy and diplomatic misunderstandings. It led to some small-scale border clashes, by and large, and, it was mostly resolved. I think the nations of the West blew it out of proportion, making it a much larger deal than what it really was. But be that as it were, those relations were mended, especially during the collapse of the USSR in the 90s. China wasn't bothering them, because China could have gone in there and taken any bit of Siberia that they would have wanted to. Russia was very weak at the time of the USSR collapse. They were so broke, they could hardly afford to maintain a world-class military. They went from a superpower to total rags in the 90s. It was a very difficult time for Russia, and the West had tried to bring Russia to heel in the 90s, but it failed. It failed because patriotic Russians stepped in and maintained control of their nation, and they've rebuilt it. And they've kept the West out of it largely, unlike what occurred in Ukraine and other former successor states of the USSR, such as Georgia and the Baltic states along the Baltic Sea, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. But largely, by and large, the former successor states of the USSR formed the CSTO, which was their own mutual aid sort of alliance. You know, it was a military and political and economic sort of alliance of the successor states of the USSR. Obviously, Georgia and Ukraine and the Baltic states left. The Baltic states directly joined NATO, and Georgia was trying to join NATO. And of course, you know, Ukraine was trained by NATO and was borderline about to join, but that was a red line for Russia. They weren't having it. But all of that aside, China wasn't bothering them. They were busy trying to cozy up to us so that they could steal everything from us, use it to develop themselves, and then obliterate us at a future time. Because since Deng Xiaoping, they'd always wanted to colonize North America. Now, in Jeremiah 50, verses 36 through 37, that specifically pertains not only to Babylon, but also to the whole Western Bloc, i.e. NATO, EU, North America, such as Canada and United States. Listen to this. In 36 through 37, Jeremiah 50, 36, 37, it specifically mentions the wise men, counselors, you know. That could even include your media personalities and influencers who try to, make us out to be something, bigger and badder than what we really are anymore. It says that they're going to be confounded and look like fools. Wow, that sounds like the propaganda media and others in those types of positions, counselors and wise men. That can include a whole broad spectrum of different people. It can include all sorts of different advisors and wealthy people and everything else. It also specifically mentions your warriors and your allies in other lands will panic and become as women. Well, what do we see? Babylon and its woke European allies, they're woke. They're girly, they're wimpy, they're pathetic, they're a joke. Militaries are all broken down. They couldn't beat anybody if they tried. They're all a joke. So Jeremiah 50, 36 through 37 specifically mentions those three classes of people. Our foreign allies in other lands. It says allies in other lands, i.e. the EU, NATO, Australia, and New Zealand, I would add too. Of course, and it says that our warriors will panic and will become as women, including our foreign allies, our woke allies, our depleted allies. So they're going to be defeated too. Jeremiah 51:31 is all about when we're being invaded, rapidly so. The messengers and runners, messengers and runners. What do I have in all my invasion work? The satellites are gone. They've been knocked out of the sky. The cyber attack was devastating to the point where the grid and telecom and the internet was shut down. And also, radio was heavily interfered with by the Chinese and Russian electronic warfare systems. Well, that would mean that you would now need runners and messengers that would run messages and curry messages because you no longer have rapid communications. You're disorganized, you're disheveled, you're weak. So that means that these messengers and runners in Jeremiah 51:31, they run and tell the king that the lands are rapidly falling. Okay? So that says a lot in and of itself. Then you have Jeremiah 51:46, which This has to do with right before we are invaded. We will be in a state of internal conflict wherein it says violence and conflict will erupt in the land as various leaders fight each other. Well, in my civil conflict Syrian style documentary, it says leaders plural, leaders in the plural sense, meaning many. Well, I had many factional leaders with their own factions in my Syrian style internal conflict. And right before that, it says rumors of armies will be coming every year. And that's before we're finally invaded. And during which time, that's when the civil conflict will be going on. It says it will erupt as different leaders are all fighting one another. Sounds like warring factions to me, folks, like I put in my documentary. Remember, my work does not in any way whatsoever conflict with the word. In fact, it backs it up 100%. As far as a timeline, as far as a logical, rational order of different events, because, you know, I have shown these things as they occur in the physical, in our actual reality around us. God has actually led me to do really solid research to the point to where the internal conflict research I did is already starting to come to pass. Woke militias, the drug war in Mexico, our open borders allowing these different militants and thugs and cartels to roam freely across. You know, there's turmoil throughout the land. You got the Texas secessionist movement being a real thing. Like I had that occur in my documentary series where Texas left. You know, Florida could easily flip-flop. They have all kinds of different things going on. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Of course, their current leader is a snake, but that doesn't mean that things couldn't happen like they did in my documentary, where in the Texas part, they arrested theirs and tried him for treason as soon as they seceded, because behind closed doors, there was a majority of pro-Texas secessionist people that took control. Also, you have your religious kooks, and that's a very real thing. Like I showed with the Mormon state, you no doubt have a plethora, a variety of cults and kooks living on compounds in far-flung parts of the nation. So that's a very real thing, too, and we know that's real. We know that exists. Also, woke militias, if I hadn't said so already, woke militias, full-fledged woke militias. Wow, they've already made a debut even before the chaos broke out. Like in my documentary, that only became a thing once the conflict got started, but they have actually made a debut already. Woke militias, folks. I put the digital currency in it, and that it was a flop, a failure, and it was only used in the woke, globalist, loyalist areas. Other areas created their own economies, systems of barter and trade. They created their own money in some cases, their own currencies. You know, it's all of these things that I put in my documentary that I've found in researching all these different things. They're all real things, and they're all happening. They're all happening. So I'm offering people extremely well-balanced, well-researched material that can help them be able to navigate such a thing in the future. You know, of course, you're going to have a mix of high and low intensity conflict where you have lower intensity things such as, you know, in urban areas, you'll have street skirmishes and, you know, people will be basically, you know, just wiping each other out at will. It'll seem like a sort of maybe purge-like situation in some areas, but in other areas, it'll be like low-level trench warfare or patrols or ambushes, skirmishes, trading artillery shells where there's artillery, rockets, whatever. That type of thing will be commonplace. It'll be commonplace because these different factions are going to get a hold of all the different variety of depots and armories where things are stored. Okay, that's going to happen, just like it did in my documentary. Of course, they're going to try to obtain control over these stockpiles of the WMDs, be it the chemical or nuclear stockpiles. Of course, they're going to do that, just like in the documentary. So many things I put in that are already coming to pass. It's almost eerie in a way to have called a lot of that so accurately. You know, it really is. It's eerie that I called all of that so accurately. You know, the collapse is what began it all, you know, and then you had a lot of issues with the power becoming patchy as the situation deteriorated, and you had less and less people maintaining the infrastructure, or when they did, they had to rely a lot on unconventional means to transport coal to coal burning power plants, or they had to, you know, figure out a way to maintain the infrastructure and rig things. You know what I mean by rig? They had to rig things up in such a way to where they could somehow make it work, you know, if they had the technical experts and expertise to do such a thing. You know, that's very real. That's happened in nations around the world when they've broken down and descended into civil conflicts. Yes, you will have some people that'll maintain the infrastructure to an extent, but then you'll develop a situation like what I saw firsthand when I was in the Iraq War. You had patchy power that had to be rotated because their grid couldn't sustain ubiquitous power, meaning powering every place all at the same time. They had to rotate it from town to town, village to village, and if it was a city, neighborhood to neighborhood, because their grid couldn't support ubiquitously powering the entire nation all at the same time. So that'll be a reality in our future. Digital currency, it'll be a flop. It'll be a flop. It'll be a total flop. I'm not talking about when the beast system comes online later. I'm talking about when they try to do it before we get invaded by China and Russia. And China and Russia are going to play the biggest part in a future one world currency because they're going to be two of the most powerful of the 10 Eastern kings that take over. A Revelation tells us all about the 10 kings and who they are. You know, they're not, Babylon is not going to be among them. Babylon's going to be gone. It's going to be colonized by the Chinese and the Russians and their allies. You know, Jeremiah is pretty clear on all of that. You know, it even says that at some point we get covered in water, even later down the road. That's the final disposition of Babylon after an occupation by these foreign forces. Now, all the work I've done was more heavily on the physical end of things, but that was only because I was trying very hard to show people just how real the scripture is. And I've managed to find a treasure trove of information throughout my research that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that we are going to have a collapse, we are going to have an internal conflict, and we are going to have a foreign invasion under the conditions of the Sino-Russian hybrid war doctrines, meaning that's what they're going to use to invade us with, okay? That's the reality of it. So, all those maps, those documentaries, that's gold. Those are gems of knowledge for people to use. Folks, you don't even understand how much time and effort I put into making those. And so few people have even really watched it. It's either that heavily shadow banned, or it's not well understood by people just how important that is. Yeah, it's low budget. It's low budget. It's extremely low budget, you know. Hey, I can knock myself for that. You know, it is low budget, but, you know, I work with what I got. You know, I'm a humble guy. I work with what I got. I do my best with what I have, you know. I'm doing my best to help other people because I don't have to do it. I just want to do it because it's the right thing to do. And I've done like mountains worth of research. And that's how I comprised those presentations. Through all the research I did, I put those presentations together for everybody. And also my live shows, I mean, sure, some of my live shows, I harp on the same things, but sometimes people learn through repetition because I'm trying very hard to show people how serious all this is. So much so, I even put the review up that I made, a week ago or so. I put the review up in the community tab just so people that missed it could see it because it's very important. People that want solutions should go and watch that because it's full of solutions if they're patient and if they're willing to sit and listen and pay attention to all the diagrams because they sure can use it for their own benefit. They can either rip and save the video or they can just use the video, pause it, and copy some of the information with a pad and pencil or pen. Write it down. Make their own diagrams. It's not hard. The only thing is people have to have the will to learn and, the ability to do so, to learn. And, whether that's writing it down or whether that's saving the video or what have you, whatever, but a lot of work has gone into all this, and I just hate to see it go to waste. I really do, because all of that stuff is very real. It's very real. Sure, in the internal conflict documentary, some of the factions, when it happens in real life, sure, they'll have different names. They'll have different ideologies, maybe. But I'm sure most of them will be similar, if not the same. But some of them will have different ideologies. They'll have different names, maybe different leaders, but the concepts are all there. They're all there. It's all there. From the multi-factional aspect of it, to how the logistics affect things, to how the resources and lack thereof will be affecting things. The famines is sure mentioned. The causes of the conflict are mentioned. All of it is in there. All of it's in there. All the different concepts are in there, and they're all very real. Made me think of that, rail strike. I think that's just a cover-up for the lack of fuel that this nation's about dry. Because that is going to curtail a lot of transit. That's going to bring this country to a grinding halt. Sure, there's still some fuel, but it's so little that it can't conceivably last. We don't have any new infrastructure going up to replace that which is being torn down. We just don't have any viable replacement. So what they're doing, they're not building anything new. They're just destroying what already was and leaving nothing left. So when the Chinese and Russians come in, they're going to Sinofy everything, and this will become New China. And the North will become New Russia, or Novoya Russia. So that's going to be North America in a nutshell. It says that we and our woke allies are going to be invaded and occupied, defeated. That's what the Bible says. And that's what reality says. Because if you look at these woke European militaries and how puny they are, even just compared to Russia, Germany, Britain, France, and Italy, combined only have a total, and this is everything, reserve, paramilitary, active, they only have a grand total of 1,146,000 forces, and the Russians have 3.5 million troops. The Russians have basically 12 times as many tanks. They have basically 2 times as many infantry fighting vehicles and APCs as all 4 of those combined. They have 15,000 specialty vehicles and armored vehicles like MRAPs and engineering vehicles, certain air defense artillery vehicles. The Europeans all combined only have 11,460 to Russia's 15,000, so there's still less on that compared to Russia. The artillery is it's just a shame. It's embarrassing. The Europeans all combined only have 345 towed pieces. The Russians have 7,500 towed pieces of artillery. Rocket artillery. The Russians have 3,400 rocket projectors, rocket artillery. The Europeans only have 122 against Russia's 3,400. The self-propelled howitzers that are self-propelled guns, whichever you want to call it, the Europeans only have 376 to Russia's 6,500. Oh man, it's not even a competition. I think the only thing that they even come close in, besides like maybe the other category of armor, like the other category with the MRAPs and specialty vehicles, ADA, things like that. I think the only other thing is in the helicopter category. It's the utility and other helicopter category where Europeans have 1,360. Whereas the Russians have about 1,000, but they have way more attack helicopters. But some of the Russian attack helicopters double as a utility helicopter, like the Hind, which can carry troops or cargo. So the Russians have a lot of those. They have 1,655 attack helicopters to Europe's 215. Europe has 215 against Russia's 1,655 attack helos. Yeah, it's not even a competition. That's the four biggest NATO European contributors, our four biggest woke allies in Europe. And they're an utter joke against Russia. That's just Russia. China is so much bigger even than Russia in a lot of categories. China just has so much stuff in storage. It's insane. And that's all the stuff that goes to their gargantuan paramilitary and also their huge reserves and their active army and air force, navy, and strategic missile forces, which are the biggest active duty military on Earth at 4 million. So they're active, they're 5 million reserve, and they're 20 million paramilitary. Puts them at 29 million, almost 30 million troops is what China has under arms. That's insane. And their technology is off the charts. They lead the world in basically every category that matters in technology: robotics, AI, directed energy weapons, weather modification, particle accelerators. They make miniature artificial stars. They're leading in lasers. They're just all over the place. Like they're burgeoning in all these different areas of technology. There's no word for it. I was going to read my story again. I finished a part of the story I was ready to read, but I'm going to do that tomorrow. But I just had to come on here and share my thoughts about everything because it just feels like time is drawing ever closer to a close in a lot of ways. People really need to take their lives more seriously because it's getting very serious out there. We don't know what day everything's going to go to hell, and we shouldn't take every day for granted. That's for sure. That's why I felt the strong need to just come on here and talk for a bit, because none of us should be taking anything for granted. This world we live in, this Disneyland ride. Listen, I've been there. I've done that. I've been to Iraq. I've seen a country that is third world, war torn, just ripped to pieces. I've been there, done that. And coming back here from that, it was almost surreal. It was a surreal experience. Going from that to this, extremely surreal. Like it didn't even fit. Like life didn't even feel real to me. After being in combat over there and living the way I had lived over there, coming back here just was like a mind. You know what? It just was totally jacking with my head to come back to this from that. And now seeing this about to turn into that, like Syria or Iraq or any of those other shitholes over there, seeing this place about to go that direction, because a collapse will certainly cause the worst to come out. like it did in my documentary right after the collapse occurred, with all the overreach and all the all the building resentments and hatreds and everything else that built up. It was like a pressure cooker. It just erupted. All the different factions came out amid the chaos of the civil unrest and rioting. You saw, if you listened to the first video, how that looked and moved like, and how the leaders emerged and everything else, and what they were doing prior to their emergence onto the scene. You saw that. So that's the most realistic rendition of such a thing that you could ever see before it even happened. I know I'm pretty insignificant in terms of, viewership and, people listening, but mark my words, when these things happen, I'm sure in some sense or another, my material might be, more spread around because people will realize just how serious it all really is. People can learn a lot from it, and that's why I say that, because there's a lot to be learned. I always meant for this channel to be an educational channel. I mean, yes, at first I wanted it to be like a dream channel where I intended on posting a few of my dreams and leaving it at that, and then just using this channel to look at other videos. But then, it just struck me that I should make an educational channel where people can learn and better themselves as it relates to these collapse and war situations, because I have a lot to contribute in that arena, not only from personal experience, but also from research. I love to research. I'm a nerd. I love it. I love to read. Not many people do anymore, but I love to read. I enjoy writing. I love all of that, I love learning, and I wish everybody else would enjoy learning too. We should all be learning together, and I want people to see the reality as it's coming together, as all these things coalesce and start to come together, because a lot of people were curious about some sort of a timeline. How would these things look? How would it all happen? You're seeing it happen. The documentaries show you what it looks like, exactly how it looks. All the concepts are there. You just have to pay attention and you have to look at it. And then you have to see it happening in the world around you, because it's starting to happen, folks. It's already starting to happen. Whether you realize it or not, that documentary is coming to pass. The one on the internal conflict, it's coming to pass. So many aspects of it are already starting to happen already. All that's left is for there to be a collapse and then a national level civil unrest situation, which will bring out these factions and these mini armies and mini strongmen, these leaders that'll fight each other, like it says in Jeremiah, so that I had just read to you earlier. So after that, we get invaded. Now, if you go back and remember what Dmitru Duduman said, now this man, he said much the same as Jeremiah says, the book of Jeremiah, and along the lines of what I'm seeing happening in reality, that I've researched, that I've compiled into a hypothetical presentation of real facts that are used to make a story and battle maps to show what these situations look like. I've researched the Syrian situation, which I used as a template, the Congolese civil conflict, the Afghan. I used my experience in Iraq. All of it, combined it. Yugoslavia, I combined aspects of all of those things, but Syria was the main template because that was the closest thing to what I see happening in the research I've done. Syria is the closest thing to what would happen here, just based on the research I've done here. What it has to do with our nation, how it's arrayed and set up, and what all types of factors would contribute to such a situation with factions. It's all there. This is a humongous nation with a humongous population. It's the third biggest nation in population on Earth, and it's the fourth biggest in land mass. This nation is huge. This little puny, woke, depleted regime and army cannot physically occupy this whole place. It's impossible. I've shown you all that with simple mathematics before. And it would be even more impossible if their armed forces split up and fractured and went different ways, which would easily occur. You see already the makings of the Free American Army when they're threatening to give people the axe to boot these people out. 260,000 was the last figure. That's like the core faction of like a Free American Army type of faction, or it could have been going to different ones. Either way, it's there. Many other factors too, like I've listed them all off. I've listed them all off many times. People just don't, I just feel like people don't see what I see. It's like these things all contributed to the documentary. They all happened like that in the documentary, just like that. Just like that. Now, like I said, of course, you could have like different names of different factions when it happens in real life, but all the contributing factors, they're all there. They're all there for that exact thing. So let me see what people are saying. I haven't really addressed the group yet. Always like when people are talking. Who's all in here? Oh, I only got 4 likes. Hey, Crystal. Oh yeah, it's always good to learn. Learning is very important, you know. What's that, Cheeto? You said what? No, you said... Yeah, well, the word says exactly how it'll happen. Collapse, civil conflict, and then we get invaded. That's the order. Oh, what percent did he give away to that black hole in Eastern Europe that we all know of? I would say it's a massive percent, because if you take the amount of rocket artillery that was just given to them, 1/3 of all our rocket artillery ammunition, 1/3 of it, and it cannot easily be replaced, okay? They can't just crank this stuff out anymore. We don't have that type of industry anymore. So we gave away 1/3 of all our rocket artillery ammo to that black hole in Eastern Europe. We've given away basically 3/4 of all our most high-tech anti-tank weapons, like the javelins, tow missiles, the whole 9 yards. I know the 3/4 figure is for sure is the javelins, but as far as tow missiles and things like that, we've given them a bunch of those too. The old LAWs, the LAWs, those older lighter ones, we've given them a bunch of those. We've given them a lot of different stuff. Stingers, and here's the thing with the Stingers, they have power packs that have to be charged. Did you know we sent them Stingers that didn't even have charged power packs? So when they pulled them out of the boxes they were in, they didn't even work. The containers that they put them in, they didn't even work because the power packs weren't even charged on them. And we gave them a whole bunch of those. Stupid, and no way to charge it. Yeah, so they were depending on these things in the heat of battle and couldn't even use them. Probably got a bunch of them eliminated. But yeah, it's like Afghanistan was a black hole for weaponry too. We left all those firearms and planes, you know, like helicopters, the whole gamut of different things that got left there. Now we're sending a whole bunch of badly needed supplies to that black hole in Europe. So that's a big issue. Also, artillery shells. We've given them platforms too. We've sent them the actual HIMARS platforms. We've sent them howitzers like the M777s, the new towed pieces, which are having issues with titanium parts that constantly crack. See, American weapons aren't streamlined and simplified like our enemies. We use complicated parts and we overly complicate the things, and the reason for that is that the parts were meant to break so that they could be fixed by new parts that would come from the manufacturer. So the manufacturer of those parts would make more and more and more money. You know, ka-ching, 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 all the tax dollars. Well, that doesn't work really when you're in a struggle against a first-rate major world power like Russia, you know, the second most powerful nation on earth after China. And China's in Europe there to help them should they need it. But really, the only way they'll need China's help, because Russia really doesn't need anybody's help. Russia could manage the whole NATO alliance on their own at this point. But China's just there because that's their best friend. They're going to do everything they can to help their friend. Even though Russia doesn't need help, Russia can manage on their own. Russia has barely used any of its military capacity, and I'm not talking about no nukes. I'm talking about conventional forces. Again and again and again and again, I've listed numbers for people, accurate, dead on point numbers about all these different things. You know, it's something I've deeply researched. I give the best, most accurate information I find, and to present the reality of these things to people, and also to show that what Scripture says is 100% right, because there's a lot of people that deny it. And you know what? This is Mystery Babylon, and we are going down. There is going to be famine and an internal conflict and then an invasion, because that's what it says. That's what the Word says is going to happen in that order. So, you know, after we get taken over, we're going to be occupied and under Chinese and Russian occupation. This will become New China. And the Arctic areas, Alaska, Russia will get Alaska back, and the northern parts of Canada with all of its treasure trove of resources. And Russia will become very rich from all the resources that they'll have from the Arctic. They'll make the Arctic a sort of Russian lake, if you will. So they'll get very wealthy off of all those resources, all the mineral wealth, all the fuels, all the hydrocarbons, the mineral wealth, the timber, everything that's up there. They will get extremely wealthy off of it, because that's a resource-rich area, the Arctic. In China, they'll get all the arable farmland they could ever need and become totally food independent once they've colonized the lower 48 and the lower part of Canada, with all the wheat production, all the fruits, all the cattle for grazing. They'll have land for grazing cattle. They'll have all of that stuff, because when they have the lower 48, they'll be completely food independent. They'll be able to feed all their people. Plus, they'll get all the resources that are down here to boot. But China and Russia already have planned that they're going to carve up North America in such a way. Of course, the Russians are going to help the Chinese for a bit down in the lower 48, because that's the main part of our country. They have to go for the jugular together. But once we're knocked out, the Russians will take their part, China will take their part. They'll carve it up. That's the plans. China and Russia are going to be the two most powerful of the 10 Eastern kings. There will be no West, because Western Europe, you're going to be occupied by Russia and China too. Probably some of their other allies like Belarus and Serbia, whoever else helps out, So the East has risen, and, China became the world superpower in real terms about 5 years ago, and that's when a lot of different things happened, was 5 years ago. That's when the Pentagon supercomputers began to project that we would lose all the conflicts with China and all the simulations. That's also when China's massive industrial production facilities that they had been building since the 90s came online and began to crank out even more vehicles, munitions, and weapons at a high rate, higher than ever before, because they already had a pretty sizable military-industrial complex. But then once they completed all these other factories, these humongous complexes, they began to crank out things at a rate never before seen since World War II. Because China has over 500 major industrial plants for military arms production. Over 500. I've read all those off before too. The stats of each of which subsidiary has how many major factory complexes, and I'm talking major. I say the size of the Lima, Ohio tank factory or bigger, and they have 500 plus of those. So they also have their 1,200 shipyards, any of which can be retooled at any time to build military ships because they're already set up that way. They're set up to do so at a moment's notice. China is ginormous in all categories. The only thing that they're not the biggest on is their nukes. But other than that, China, is a ginormous superpower. But their nuke arsenal is big enough for them to still be the world superpower at about 1,000 nukes, because they've had 22 tons of enriched weapons-grade uranium, and they've had 2 to 4 tons of plutonium within the last 25 years. That's enough fissile material for them to have built 1,200 nukes. But I give the most reasonable estimate of about 1,000, like the high median estimate. I've seen estimates that are as low as 350 or 400, but that's way too small. Considering all the silos that China's added, all the silos they already had, they have road mobile, they've got train mobile missiles. They have the biggest land-based missile force on Earth. Most of them are conventionally armed, of course, but they still have 1,000 nukes. I mean, like the ICBMs are made to carry 2 warheads apiece, and I'm talking about the DF-41s and the DF-31s. Those are made to carry 2 warheads apiece. So you do the math, you see how many silos and how many missiles they have, ICBMs. They have 1,000 nukes, easy. So, China's nuke arsenal is all new and modern. They have ways to cloak their missiles, and I've told everybody how that works before. They have hypersonics. They have fractional orbital bombardment systems, which means they can circumnavigate the Earth and hit their target. And with a nuke, you don't have to be pinpoint accurate, but it's close enough. They've already tested it. It's been perfected by now. So China's a very, very dangerous enemy, and people underestimate them, and it's stupid. And that's all propaganda. And the arrogance is what's going to get us humbled. Because, you can't ever underestimate your enemy and expect to come out on top. It doesn't work like that. You underestimate your enemy, you're going to get your ass kicked around. It's always been the case. All the fact-finding and digging that I've uncovered shows that China's the top dog in real terms. They have been for 5 years in many categories. Industry, the numbers, the types of tech they have that they basically lead the world in, their size of their economy in real terms, their manufacturing sector, their military industrial complex, just the overall entire industrial base as a whole, the shipping facilities, ship production facilities, their shipyards, they're just all of it. They're everything. They're huge. They're military, paramilitary, nuke arsenal. Amount of missiles they have, it's freakish. Their arms stockpiles are gargantuan. I mean, they're even bigger than Russia's, and Russia's sitting on some sizable arms stockpiles. They have whole boneyards full of tanks. Some of them are maintainable, some aren't. In that Russian tank video, I went over that. But yeah, no one will, and no one can either, Cheeto. Nobody can, even if they wanted to, because our woke allies get invaded too. Jeremiah says, it's in the word, our woke allies will become as women, so will our troops. They'll be defeated. They're going to be conquered and occupied by China and Russia. Who's this? Yeah. Hey, Miriam, hope you're doing all right. But yeah, Looking Glass, I've heard of that, and, there's a lot of interesting things said about that, but allegedly, I don't know what I believe about it. I think that, maybe they do have some kind of occult technology like that, very occultic, but, I've heard that they can't see past a certain point. so they don't know what's going to happen. You know, they're failing in their attempts to predict the future with their little, you know, occult technology. You know, as far as the looking glass goes, you know, I think all that stuff is, you know, silly and kooky, but no, I believe there's a realistic aspect to it for sure, because we know that these people practice the occult and it gives them certain abilities. So, you know, I'm not going to totally discount it, but you know, I think that they're just, you know, lost to the point to where they're just into all this kooky, crazy crap with these really occult projects that they're into and everything else. They're going to get their asses handed to them for all their sins. Babylon, their leaders and everything else are going to pay for it. You know, in the book of Jeremiah, it says that the rulers of Babylon are going to pay for their sins. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, but you know, they're going to be captured by China and Russia. Like I've always told everybody, these Western elites aren't going to run shit. They're just going to get humiliated and enslaved. You know, they'll end up like the Roman Emperor Valerian. Read about what happened to him. The Roman Emperor Valerian was taken prisoner by the king of Persia in a Roman-Persian war in ancient times, okay? So Valerian ended up being taken captive. Now this guy, remember, he's the Emperor of Rome, the superpower of its day. He was captured by the Persians, and he was kept as a slave until his death. That's real. Leaders get captured, leaders get humbled. You don't think what happened to Saddam is going to happen to the rulers of Babylon? Of course it will. These elites, these Western elites, are not going to get away with nothing. It's going to be an Eastern New World Order that's going to be even worse than anything that the Western elites would have done, even if, as bad as the Great Reset is, as bad as all that stuff is, the East is even worse. The Chinese are the creators of the social credit system, okay? They created that. The West copied it, okay? China, the Red Dragon, they've never had the light of Yeshua, Messiah. You know, but the West did, and the West turned their back on the light of Yeshua. That's why we're going to be punished. Because by and large, the Western world, Christendom as they've called it, the Christian world, turned its back on Yeshua, just like Israel turned its back on Father, on Yah. You know, and what happened every time was they were punished by a more powerful empire that would come in and take them over and brutalize them for what they did. So, Mystery Babylon USA is going to be conquered and occupied and brutalized by the Chinese. That's what's going to happen. China is a wicked heathen nation, but they never had the truth, which is why God is going to use them as the baseball bat to hit us in the head with, because we had the truth and we turned our back as a nation on Yeshua Messiah. You know, not we on this show, not me, not you all, but I'm saying the people of this nation, the leadership, the regime, turned its back on Yeshua Messiah completely. The leadership are all occult, and they've been occult for a long time, but they've taken things so far that their sin has reached God in heaven. It's that bad. So, as evil as China is, China never had the truth. They never had the light of Yeshua. So, although they're a heathen nation, they're being raised up like Assyria was raised up to punish Israel. They're being raised up to punish Mystery Babylon USA, along with Russia. Now, Russia is a quote-unquote Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox Christian nation. Over there in the East, you have a strange amalgamation of allies. You have Shia Muslims, you have Eastern Orthodox Christians in the form of Russia and Belarus and Serbia. You know, all of those Eastern European nations. You have the Red Chinese, who are like the ringleaders, these secular humanist, godless, evil atheists, these totalitarian, you know, evildoers that organ harvest, and they created the social credit system. They have a closely run by AI and MSS spy society where people can't do or say anything freely. I mean, they're totally oppressed. They're totally watched all day, every day. They have Lao guys, the camps. You have strange bedfellows over there, and you might even have the Hindus joining with Modi. So you got a mix of Hindus and Muslims and Orthodox Christians and godless atheists like North Korea and China, where they worship their dictator as God. So, Xi Jinping is worshipped as a god in China. He's their emperor for life. Same in North Korea with Kim. Kim is worshipped as a god. So, that's what they do in totalitarian regimes that are despotic communist police states. They worship the almighty state. That's their god. That's who they worship, and the leader of the state is like their god. So, it's a strange mix over there in the East, but they're going to be used to punish Mystery Babylon for its sins. The word is clear on that. It's clear on that. It's clear on the 10 kings being the 10 Eastern victorious kings after World War III. The War of Ezekiel perfectly describes a World War III where we get annihilated. So, by these Eastern nations. So that's in a nutshell, that's what's going to happen. Collapse, famine, internal conflict, a Syrian-style internal conflict, because it says there's going to be different leaders fighting each other. It's what it says in Jeremiah. Then we get invaded. That's the order. That's what the word proclaims. So I'm merely, showing this to be the case with all the work I've done, because all the work I've done perfectly lines up with what the word says. Perfectly lines up with it. Yeah, Cheeto. I mean, maybe. I don't know about all that. I just know it's some kooky occult crazy project that they're into. But, if it is real like that, real in that sense, that it's like literally like that and it's not something else, if it's something like that, I don't think they will be able to see past a certain point, because I don't think God would allow that. Because they sure can't do anything to change their fate. The word is clear on what happens to them. They're going to be captured and humiliated by the Chinese and the Russians. That's their future. If anybody wants to say something, say it now, or forever hold your peace. Because I'm going to get off soon. I'm getting tired. Oh. Man, only 5 likes? Wow. 14 people and 5 likes. Damn, am I doing that bad? Yeah, Cheeto. Well, those documentaries and stuff I made, that's as real as it gets without it even happening. It's very low budget, but that's as real as it gets, man. That's how it's going to happen. I highly advise everybody that's listening, it hasn't done so already, to go to my playlists. You can watch all my miscellaneous shows. They're all in their own playlist. My Friday shows are all in one playlist, and my documentaries are all in one playlist. I even have written, typed out stories that go with the invasion work. Same timeline, same everything. It's just happening in different parts of the country while the invasion's happening. Those are typed out in my community tab. Now, if you have a PC or a laptop, it's a lot easier to do all the scrolling you'll need to do to read the whole stories. You have to read them from bottom up, because the way posts go up in the community tab, they start at the bottom and they go up. I've written 4 of them. One's extremely short with only 2 parts, and the other 3 are much longer. First one being the longest I've typed. You're free to print and save those stories if you find them helpful. I had to misspell certain words in them on purpose because the algos I've had parts of my stories taken down, so I've had to retype them. So I've had to misspell or abbreviate lots of words, but if you can learn how to read through that, you'll find them very helpful and enjoyable, because the characters really show you what it's really like on the ground and how to navigate it. And my own personal experience in combat played a key role in how I wrote those stories, combined with what I know about the weapon systems of our enemies, their capabilities, how they do things and train. It all blended together to make a perfect story, along with other aspects. So if you want to read the type stories, you can feel free to, copy and paste and save them, or you can just, print them, whatever you want to do. They're there for you. I suggest people take advantage of all the material here to help people before they shut down YouTube or shut channels like mine down. You better be saving this stuff for yourself or learning from it, because, this is real shit. This is real shit. People that, don't want the help, well, you're going to be the ones hurting in the end. I can guarantee you that. I'm trying to help people navigate this stuff. And, it just seems like people are just playing games anymore. People are just playing around. They're playing games. They're not taking stuff serious. Just because it's low budget, just because I don't have no fancy music or whatever other bullshit, doesn't mean you shouldn't take it seriously. It's it's extremely dire, and I highly suggest people take the work seriously and learn from it. All my documentaries are in their own playlists too. I have the Pacific Northwest playlist, just about that region during the foreign invasion. It shows how Chinese and Russian and Allied units appear on CCP properties inside the country as Trojan units, as well as coming from Canada and landing on beaches, all of it. I also have the regular 96-hour invasion one, which takes place in different parts of the country, in different campaigns, different campaign maps. I have one in Missouri. I have two that take place in the East Coast, or actually three if you count Florida. I've got Florida, I've got Northern Maryland, which is the very first two. I've got Southern Maryland and Virginia comprising one. They're all in that 96-hour invasion playlist. And then the Pacific Northwest is more or less just off on its own, but it's a continuation of the same thing, just taking place up there. Lots of details. I couldn't do a Texas one because that one would have been so big with all the different units involved that I couldn't have. It would have taken forever to make those maps and fit it all in there. Yeah, I'd have been making long documentaries had I had to do a Texas one, because that was a key point where massive armies crossed the border, as well as Trojans inside of it already. So I suggest people take advantage of that, and also the internal conflict documentary. Feel free to rip them, save them, whatever you can do, whatever you want to do. I would do it before you can't. That work is very educational, deeply educational. That's why I do what I do. I want to help people learn. I want to show people that the word is coming to pass right before our eyes. See what people are saying here before I get going. I'm going a good hour. Well, yes, Cheeto. Yeah, I feel like God has led me in my research and what to research and how to put the presentations together. God definitely played a key role in me putting those presentations together and the way I did it. Because a lot of the prerequisites, the things that happened in the background before the actual thing got started, so to speak, a lot of the stuff happening in real life matches things that were in that exact documentary. Go figure. How about that? So God obviously led me in my research to find everything I needed to make a accurate presentation and rendition of the future. Albeit, although it's hypothetical, it's hyper-realistic as well. It's hyper-realistic, although it's hypothetical. The first video is basically just the origins of the different factions in that civil conflict one. Then the second video, half of it is the continuation of the origin story, with the second half beginning the battle maps The third video has more battle maps plus explanations on the economy and how the economy's developed in the different factional areas that they controlled. Also, the factional leadership are talked about. Like I blended so many aspects into that. How resources were managed, logistics, all of it. All of it. The role that foreign influence and interference played with the Chinese and Russians sending surplus weapons to help destabilize the situation. All of that is in there. All of that is in there. That documentary was a masterpiece. People really need to pay attention to that stuff. You'll see all the concepts. It's very real. So, let's see what people are saying before I go. Hey, Barreto, what's up? Where does Hawaii fit in all this? Well, all I can say about Hawaii is that China and Russia are going to take it over, of course. They're not going to get away with nothing. You know, we already know, and I've covered this extensively in the past, Russia and also China, but also more recently, Russia had done extensive naval drills around Hawaii. As you know, they came very close to the coast. They flew their MiG-31 Foxbats all the way from the Russian Far East. I mean, way up there. They flew them all the way. They gave them spare fuel tanks. They had a refueling plane fly along. They didn't need an aircraft carrier to get to Hawaii. So Hawaii's not safe by any stretch of the imagination. They can land their Marines there and capture Hawaii quick, whether that's the Chinese and Russian Marines or whether it's, you know, the Chinese Marine Militia, which is a paramilitary force. I mean, they have options all over the place. I mean, they've got different entities and forces that they can use to capture Hawaii. And being that Hawaii is not very big, it wouldn't be hard to capture at all. Russia and China can easily reach it with aircraft. They don't even need aircraft carriers to do it. You know, Russia proved it when they did their exercise with their MiGs flying all the way from the bases in the Russian Far East all the way down to Hawaii. That's extremely long range. See, it's not like World War II when prop planes couldn't go very far. These new planes, they have options. They have extra fuel tank capacities. They already have longer ranges to begin with, even without the extra fuel. Then, of course, there's refueling planes, refueling aircraft that can refuel whole squadrons in midair, keep them going. You know, they don't have to use an aircraft carrier to get to us. You know, China has 4 aircraft carriers. They're finishing their 4th one. It's in the dry dock right now. It's just having the computers and electronics installed in it. You know, so it's about ready. Radar, all that stuff. You know, but the hull and everything else, it's already built. It's already there, ready to go. They've already got 3 working aircraft carriers that are already deployed. One's a super carrier. So China would use their aircraft carriers more in a defensive role to push their defenses out further from the coast. See, they don't use theirs for power projection like we do. We try to sail ours all the way around the world. But they would use theirs for more of defense because the age of the carrier with the missiles that are around now, a carrier for power projection is obsolete. So our carriers will be sunk by the Chinese missiles or their submarines. Submarines can sink whole carrier groups like the French sub Saphir did in that exercise where they sunk a whole American carrier group by itself. A French nuclear-powered attack sub, an older one too. These new Chinese subs, man, these things are like state of the industry, cutting edge, like state of the art. You know, they'll sink our Navy in no time flat with the missiles they have, the subs they have. Plus, they have aircraft carriers for pushing out their air defenses further from the coast. The types of electronic warfare they have, it'll just disable our jets like they did in the South China Sea with their base on what was it, Mumian, their Mumian base. That was a man-made base out in the reefs. They put an electronic warfare installation on there, and 2 F-35s almost crashed because they flew within just barely within range of the electronic field generated by those antennas. They almost lost control and crashed their aircraft. They just barely limped back to their carrier because, you know, they were about to crash. So China's electronic warfare capabilities are very potent, and they're going to integrate that with their anti-satellite weapons, their cyber war, and all their missile technology and all their different other stuff, and they're going to just pound us when they combine all that. We won't be able to respond because we won't be able to communicate, coordinate, or do anything to respond. Everything will be out. If you can't communicate, you can't coordinate, you can't organize, you'll be disheveled, disorganized, you'll be broken up, destroyed, isolated in pockets, annihilated. That's the future. That's just the realities of that type of war. It's modern war. This will be very different from the types of wars we've been fighting with counterinsurgencies, where we're fighting people that don't have an air force or really anything. I'm sorry, everybody. My phone had died on me. Anybody that's still in here, I'm sorry about that. I apologize. I plugged it into the charger. Well, welcome, Beretta. I'm glad you're here. Well, Beretta, I hope you enjoy the documentaries if you go and watch those. Some of the best information on my channel is my playlists. Now, I organized everything for everybody in my playlists just to make it extremely easy for people to see everything in different categories. Like, I have my miscellaneous shows in their own playlist. I have my Friday shows. I do a show every Friday evening at 7. I have those in a playlist. I have my documentaries in their own playlists. It's all organized. Like, my documentaries are the it's the second American Syrian style, as in with factions and sectarian type of thing, with factions, a Syrian style conflict documentary. That's like 5 live shows all in one documentary, so you can watch them in order. They just play out in order. If you read the descriptions of every video, it always enhances your understanding of the material, because I always add supplementary information in the description boxes that might not be in the video, that kind of help the understanding or the context of the video. So if you go to the documentaries and you read the descriptions, you don't have to, but if you do read the descriptions, it helps you understand exactly what it is you're seeing that's playing out. Now, the documentaries involve a lot of maps, like map battles that happen on a map. So they happen in different areas, and I show how in the invasion ones, it shows how the Trojan shock armies of the Chinese and Russians appear on the Chinese CCP-owned properties that they've purchased all throughout America. So wherever you see the little battalion units appear, which are these subunits of the parent units, which could be a brigade, a division, or even a regiment, or, what have you, they appear on CCP properties, which are like farms or other properties that the Chinese purchased, and they're going to use to base their Trojan armies on as like jump-off points for their invasions, or the combat outposts, or logistical points, so on and so forth. All of that is in my documentaries. So when you watch these invasion maps, what you're seeing is these different units appearing on the Chinese-owned properties, as well as units coming in from either sea landings, where they land on the beaches, or also from Canada, which is where many of the aircraft that attack come from. They either come from Canada, or they come from Bahamas, or Cuba. Some come from Nicaragua or Venezuela also, and Canada. So the aircraft during the invasion come from those areas, and so do the ground forces, but they also beach land on the coastal areas, where I have maps that depict the coastal areas. So it's very detailed. It shows the concepts of fourth generation warfare extremely well, which is a Chinese and Russian made doctrine. Fourth generation warfare actually has a setup period where they set up and they weaken before they go in, and it also has a military phase where they actually conduct the military operations from a mixture of their Trojan shock armies that are already inside the country, that are doing most of the heavy lifting, combined with their externals. So whenever I say externals, I'm talking about forces that are crossing the borders or beach landing. So the externals come in as a heavy-handed reinforcement, while the Trojans are doing all the heavy lifting, already capturing cities and installations and places like that extremely rapidly. Now, the Pacific Northwest documentary of the invasion was made more to highlight the terrain and how terrain affects military operations, like the mountains. The Northwest has very diverse terrain features. It has the Rockies, it has the Cascades, it even has deserts, like parts of the Great Basin Desert go into Idaho and southeast Oregon. you have forests, you have a whole host of different terrain. So I showed how terrain affects some of the campaign of the military operations when they're invading. That was the Pacific Northwest one. Now, also, I showed in the 96-hour invasion one, I showed more conventional things like how they go for human settlements first, which are like your big cities, medium cities, small cities, towns. They go for human settlements first before they fan out and start taking other areas. They also go for installations and infrastructure, key logistical routes like invasion routes, logistical routes. That's what they go for first. And I highlight all of those things as an educational piece in those documentaries, which are made to show what that looks like with actual real units on a real map of a real area with real everything. Everything in it is real. I even added like partisans that would be there, reactionary civilians that would, pop up thinking that they're going to do something and get wiped out. All of that stuff is in there. The main thing is to show people how to navigate it all. Show people that the best way to navigate it is to evacuate the hot zone, get out of the hot zone and evacuate and go out to the wilderness. Make sure you already have pre-positioned supplies because you're going to need to live off of something. You're going to have to live off of something. So the smartest thing to do is go out and have caches, cache away your food, your water, ammunition, everything you need, medical supplies. Tents, all of it, cache it away, bury it out in the woods somewhere, or hide it somewhere where only you know it is, and you would be wise to have several of them out in nature so that when the day comes we get invaded, you'll have a place to flee to, and you'll be able to live. And you'll have to live as a nomad, though. You'll have to live on the move. You'll be constantly moving because that's really the only way you can survive it. And I would be dishonest if I said that everybody could make it, because everybody's not going to make it. But you have at least a chance to make it and navigate it if you do those things. Now, in my community tab, I have a review live that I did, and it's very important. It's worth sitting through. I show things with actual illustrations, diagrams. You would be very wise to sit through that and watch that. That's like the newest post I had made in my community tab. Also, I like to post my concept art in my community tab from different documentaries I made or the stories. It's all in there. The stuff for the civil conflict as well as the foreign invasion, it's all in there. So if you wanted to look at the artwork or read the stories that are much further back, if you have a PC or a laptop, that's the best way to read those. But you can also copy them, paste them, save them, whatever you want to do. They're there. It's all resources there that are meant to help everybody. It's just meant to help everybody. I did it all to try to help people, educate people, because education is the key. God said that my people perish for a lack of what? A lack of knowledge. My people perish for a lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge. God wants his people to be educated, so people better get educated and stop playing games and actually learn about this stuff and learn how to survive it. Because I feel like people are playing games right now. They're not taking it serious, and they should be. Now's not the time to be fooling around with nothing. See what people are saying here before I get going. It died on me earlier. I never really got to finish my thought. Well, you're welcome, Beretta. I hope you enjoy the information, the documentaries. All of it's free. I don't hide nothing behind no paywalls. I don't even ask for no money and nothing. I don't sell nothing. I ain't about none of that shit. I'm about education here. So I just want people to be educated and be aware and learn how to navigate this stuff. So I'm about solutions on this channel, and I've said it for the few years that I've had this channel. I've always said that. I'm always about solutions, and I offer real solutions. People might not like my solutions, but it's the only way, because they're realistic solutions. It's the only way you're going to make it. You're going to have to be on the move, and you're going to have to move a lot. You're going to have to be nomadic or semi-nomadic, and there's a lot of information on all that. I have a community tab story review, too, that has all that stuff in it. All the stuff about field sanitation and preventing preventable diseases that kill people like dysentery, typhus, all that stuff, cholera. I have videos on tactics. From primitive to more advanced. I have videos that show how the enemies do things. I have videos about logistics. I have everything in there. Everything. I suggest people use the resources that are available here, because no one else is really doing this. I'm doing this, but I don't see really anybody else doing this. So, I hope you all have a blessed night. And sorry about the phone dying. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Cheeto. You have a blessed night. You too, Crystal. Have a good night. You all be blessed.